Depression isn't a malfunction. It's the predictable outcome of a parasitic control system that runs on shame. Shame is the system's perfect tool. Fear can be overcome. Guilt can be argued with. But shame attacks your right to exist. When you're ashamed of who you are, you voluntarily erase yourself. No external force needed. The system doesn't have to control you. You control yourself for it. The training works through repetition. Every authentic expression that doesn't fit the program gets met with shame.
How could you?
What's wrong with you?
Nobody will love you if you're like that.
No sane person would say things like this to their dog or cat. It would be considered cruel. Nobody will love you if you're like that.
This is some bullshit.
We love them simply because they exist. Yet, when it comes to people, suddenly the rules change and love becomes conditional on performance. And before you know it, you're sitting in a doctor's office being told your problem is chemical. But wait, you might say, isn't depression just a chemical imbalance? Don't depressed people simply have fucked up brain chemistry that needs fixing? Here's the thing. There's no test for serotonin levels before prescribing antidepressants. No studies definitively proving depressed people have less serotonin. But there are studies showing that artificially lowering serotonin doesn't cause depression in non-depressed people. Of course, neurochemistry changes with depression, but that's the consequence, not the cause. Live in constant stress from suppressing yourself, cortisol goes through the roof. Can't experience pleasure from an imposed life, dopamine drops. Stuck in chronic helplessness, your entire neurochemistry goes to shit. The system puts the cart before the horse. You have depression because your neurochemistry is disrupted, not your neurochemistry is disrupted because you're forced to live against your nature. But treating the chemistry won't bring back what was lost. Your real self didn't die, it learned to hide. Every authentic impulse became a threat of rejection, so you buried it as deep as possible under layers of shame until you forgot it was even there. What remained on the surface was a performance, the acceptable version. The one that follows rules, manages emotions, plays the role. A functional copy that knows how to navigate social requirements, but has no actual life force of its own. This is what people call growing up, trading your living self for a manageable avatar, and then wondering why everything feels empty. That emptiness everyone talks about, feeling nothing inside, the need to fill that void, that's not some mysterious existential condition. That's the exact space where your authentic self used to live before shame evicted it. You're walking around with a U-shaped hole in your consciousness. The system calls this depression and pretends it's surprising. But what else would you call it when the actual subject has been replaced with a hollow performance? Depression is the natural state of a consciousness that's been colonized by shame. You can't want anything because wanting reveals the authentic self, and that self has been marked as unacceptable. You can't feel joy because joy is spontaneous, and spontaneity threatens the performance. You can't feel anger because anger might break the mask. So you feel nothing, or rather, you feel the absence of yourself. Here's the fucked part. This isn't accidental. It's a system of control that humans created, but that evolved beyond anyone's intention. Your parents didn't choose to install it in you. The program was already running in them. School reinforced it because institutions naturally select for compliance. Work demands it because authentic humans resist exploitation. The whole architecture is self perpetuating. Shame creates hollow people raise children through shame. The cycle continues. No conspiracy needed, just a parasitic pattern that found the perfect host in human social structure. And speaking of social structure, let's not forget what kind of shit we're actually living in. Some think changing the political system would fix this, swap capitalism for socialism or whatever. But depression exists in every ism because they're all different flavors of the same suppression architecture. The decorations change, the control remains. And I can't even touch religion here, because if I do, my own country's suppression system would consider me a criminal. But it sure is one of the primary control mechanisms. The game is rigged, but they gaslight you about your effort when you fail. Basic survival, food, shelter, has been weaponized into compliance tools. You don't work to live, you live to work, because the alternative is homelessness. And every day you're forced to perform civility with people whose fakeness makes you want to scream. That plastic, how are you, when nobody gives a fuck how you are. You mirror their dead smile, discuss nothing, and feel your soul corrode from the inside. Nothing makes sense until you understand. The system isn't malfunctioning, it's hostile by design. Your confusion comes from expecting human logic from an anti-human structure. The system extracts compliance and feeds on exhaustion. It has no use for joy or vitality. But why doesn't everyone get depressed? Because the intensity of suppression isn't uniform. The system formats everyone, but in some families the pressure isn't as brutal. If there was no entrenched narcissism or constant manipulation at home, the authentic self didn't have to go into full exile. That means less shame, fewer prohibitions, and more chances to stay alive inside. Others survive by finding spaces for authenticity later, in subcultures, relationships, or creative work. And some split themselves, keeping a mask for the world and a secret corner where the real self still breathes. But for those whose authentic self is too strong to fully suppress and too shamed to fully express, that's where depression lives. You're caught between two impossibilities: being yourself, which is forbidden, and not being yourself, which is unbearable. Then you go to therapy, and what happens? They pathologize your emptiness. Call it clinical depression. Give you pills to artificially juice the empty performance to give your avatar more energy. Teach you coping strategies to better manage the absence of yourself. But neither brings back the exiled self. They just make the performance more sustainable. They never address the core issue. You're not depressed because your brain is broken. You're depressed because you're living as an empty shell, while your real self sits in a basement lockdown, too ashamed to exist. Some people can maintain this split indefinitely. That's what the system calls high functioning. But sustainability isn't the same as living. You can run the performance for decades, but the emptiness only grows. The industry loves this. You're not just depressed, you're now a depression patient, a recurring revenue stream. They'll help you manage your condition indefinitely, never mentioning that the condition is the system working exactly as designed. Meanwhile, every symptom of depression is actually evidence of life. The inability to find meaning in all the surrounding bullshit, the resistance to performing enthusiasm you don't feel, the exhaustion from maintaining a false self. These aren't malfunctions. They're the last honest signals from whatever authentic part of you is still fighting. Depression is your authenticity's refusal to cooperate, not dramatic rebellion, because the shamed self doesn't know how to rebel, just quiet refusal, a work stoppage, where you provide the minimum energy to keep the body alive, but nothing for the performance. The system's response? You're sick. Here's medication. Try harder. Work on yourself. Anything except maybe the performance is the problem. Think about what they call recovery. It's about getting you functional again. Back to work, back to compliance, back to not making anyone uncomfortable with your actual existence. Even therapists who work with shame rarely question the system that weaponized it. They help you heal your shame while the shame-generating machine keeps running. Real recovery would mean recognizing that the voice in your head saying you are not good enough, not acceptable, not worthy, that's not your voice. That's the system wearing your voice like a mask. It's been there so long you think it's you, but it's not. It's the control mechanism. Depression isn't a weakness. It's what happens when a living being is forced to play dead. When authenticity is treated as a crime and the sentence is internal exile. That emptiness you feel is the negative space where you're supposed to be. The you that existed before they taught you to be ashamed of it. The you that knew how to want things without permission, feel things without apology, exist without justification. That version is still there under all that shame. Not dead, just buried, waiting for you to realize that the crime it's being punished for, being authentically, inconveniently, and predictably alive, was never a crime at all. Can you uninstall shame? Not through any technique or practice. Not through authentic actions or self-expression. The system loves when you try that shit. It just creates new markets for authenticity workshops and self-discovery retreats. This isn't becoming better or healing or any of that bullshit. You can't fight the parasite using its own logic. Every attempt at healing inside the system just feeds it more data about how to manage you better. The only real move is to see the whole architecture, the entire parasitic structure. Once you see that the shame was never yours, that the voice judging you is the system's implant, that your personality is largely occupied territory, then what? Then nothing. The seeing is the thing. You can't unsee it, and the parasite's main power, making you think it's you, breaks. Like pulling back the curtain on The Wizard of Oz. People in depression often think there's no place for them in this world. They're almost right. There's no place for the living in this system. But the system is not the whole world. Its last trick is making you believe its borders are reality itself. There is no physical place to hide from it. The program covers everything. But the exit isn't out there. It begins the moment you stop obeying the parasite's voice. The instant you see it as an implant and not your own, you're already outside its map. The cure is seeing shame for what it is, software installed by a parasitic system that runs on your compliance. But that would mean the end of a very profitable industry built on maintaining the infection, and a lot of very inconvenient people remembering who they actually are before the parasite got to them.